All right, welcome to the AI Revolution podcast. We are so excited to have Terry and Salma, right? I'm saying that right, Salma? Thank you both for coming on the show. We're so excited to hear about you, and I know you're doing so much in the AI space right now. We're very excited to learn and hear all about it. Could you both maybe give us a quick intro as far as your path to AI, your background? We'd love to learn a little bit more about each of you.
I'm Terry, co-founder of Remix with Salma, and I guess we've been working together in applied machine learning for about a decade now. We went to school together, studied applied math, and as we were looking into career options, data science was kind of an emerging field around that time, and we started learning about some of the data science applications in text and search and building applications for healthcare groups. And I would say for us, myself especially, like I became very interested in deep learning and computer vision and the advances in like uh, perception, IoT, robotics, maybe around 2016, 2017. And we started a blog to kind of showcase projects we were working on of those flavors. So joining like hardware hackathons and trying to just like make new applications, get our own data, kind of like experience the process of building out a new application in that area, and showcasing that with these hackathons or in our blog on open source. And maybe around 2018, 2019, like started doing more of that work professionally, like working with robotics groups and applying some of the things that we were self teaching. I think coming a little later, we were doing more with like image and video, and I started working with a video streaming company, get more experience with that type of data and learn about recommender systems, and learned a lot about like engineering culture in general, working with like a bigger team, more engineers, like more process, more infrastructure. And we were doing some of that until I guess it might have been 2021 or so. For me, more recently, this is where like our paths of working together kind of fork a bit. And for me, I worked more with some robotics groups, doing more with perception. I did some work consulting with the AAA game studio, like when they were trying to discover like what they could do with generative AI. So I guess, in 2022, 2021, when, diffusion was really taking off. And then, of course, later in the year when LLMs were really taking off, these game studios wanted to find out how they could use LLMs for making characters interactive. They wanted to figure out how they could take their content library and use that to generate more of their characters, more of the lore. They wanted to explore like text to speech and all these different generative technologies. So kind of helping them like build fast, explore like what's possible with text to 3D, or these different technologies that were emerging. And I was doing that until around the beginning of last year. That's when I left those roles and more formally kind of like uh, started with Remix. And our idea there was to take generative AI and use that to kind of unblock on data synthesis and some of the things that we were running into in practice, like building a perception pipeline. You might find yourself needing to adapt that for the environment that you're deploying these models and pipelines. So we saw high quality image generation and also text generation as being like real enablers for ease of use in that. And I guess Selma has her own take on that, but that's me up till now.
Yeah. And I guess our stories are really intertwined. So my early days were influenced heavily by what Terry was doing. Actually, I was kind of picking up from, the kinds of problem spaces and things that he was exploring. And I get exposed to data science through that experience. And I was interested when I was still in school, kind of like the intersection of um, AI technologies or data science techniques, machine learning kind of software, where it's a bit more probabilistic, so it's not deterministic software necessarily. I was really interested in that idea paired with hardware or kind of like things that in the real world to bring them to life. So that's where my interests were aligned, and it kind of led into some of those hardware hackathons where we were leaning into a news spike in that timeline, or in that around that time, like 2018, where we were really exploring the fringes of how can we deploy AI applications on like really small devices. We started with like Raspberry Pis and eventually Arduinos and all that good stuff, and it was really fun. And that opened up like other opportunities to explore deeper into AI applications, particularly where that led to that blog that Terry and I co-wrote called smellslikeml. And through that experience, that time where our timelines fork, I joined Databricks to kind of expand my horizons into more of like the cloud infrastructure. So I wanted to understand how organizations from startups to really large Fortune 500 companies, when they go about actually their data strategy and implementing AI applications in their products, how do they go about that, and what's the best way to set that up? And so I learned a ton from my colleagues there. And when generative AI started exploding, Terry and I kind of looked at each other and thought, there's something interesting here to see if we can make it easier for more folks to be able to implement their strategies, and kind of fill in the gaps in areas where maybe there's teams that don't have a lot of data scientists or machine learning talent on board. They might not have a lot of data assets to start with, or maybe the appetite to go ahead and like do all the heavy lifting that it requires to even just get a model trained and then deployed. And so we are kind of focusing on filling in the gaps around the entire life cycle to help more people just kind of get through it all and then be able to maintain it in a simpler way.
Okay. Awesome. I was just going to ask one quick. So now you're with Remyx. If you could summarize the goal, the idea behind Remyx in like, your elevator pitch, 1 to 2 sentences, whatever, like what would you say the goal is there?
I would say our goal, we've built an agent that makes it easier to develop and deploy ML applications, ML pipelines. So our goal is to really use generative AI and machine learning to make an ease of use platform for building ML pipelines. When we started, it was focused more on computer vision applications. Things are trending towards like bigger multimodal models, but within the AI application architecture, I think there's going to be for a long time a demand for models that occupy a different part of that like speed accuracy trade-off. And so our platform really started by focusing on simplifying that process. Like not every op or every architecture will be supported for, the hardware that you want to deploy on, for example. And so we saw that those difficulties would slow things down, hold people back. People who are really excellent, like roboticists, ROS developers, maybe don't have like the data science spike, or they don't want to deal with like training adapting models. Like there's a expectation that you should be able to just pull a good high quality model off the shelf, but often those models are optimized for performance on a research benchmark data set, and that skew in the data between what it was trained on and where you're deploying and what that data distribution looks like is a problem. So people are underwhelmed by what you can get from running like a mobile net or something like this. And it's just because like those recipes we're describing, all those hurdles with conversion are kind of like stopping people from getting that like ideal place, that ideal trade-off in accuracy and speed. So we started with vision, but especially over the last few months, right, we've seen a lot of small language models. We've seen a lot of progress with parameter efficient and data efficient fine tuning. So in most ways, you could consider like the price of specializing a text generator is going down. There's more options for a good high quality base model off the shelf to start with. All of this is like it's the evidence that the AI application space is really maturing, because there's like people and companies popping up all the time with solutions to address some of those problems. But it's also a huge integration headache for people when they're trying to build something. It's like you need a half a dozen tools now to get the best performance out of a model. So if we could with Remix, I guess I'm past two sentences now, but if we could with Remix, like basically apply an opinionated design in our platform, use all the best practices as they're emerging. If we could just commit to focusing on ease of use, we think that those tropes about AI initiatives and their like terrible success rate, that's something we could make a dent in.
So if I could kind of sum it up, Remix is a way for people to deploy I guess I would call it the smallest necessary model. So essentially really, really fine-tuned cases of developing really bespoke models for bespoke use cases.
I would say it's you're close on that. I would say it's both. It could be
Mhm.
small, or the models themselves could also be larger. But it's the key here is the specialization and customization. So
Mhm.
essentially, in the land of all the tools, all the base models, all the cool things happening, how do you constrain the scope of those models to operate and work for the tasks that you want it to do?
Mhm.
And then also, how do you make that process really easy? So how do you make it easy to process and curate that data, train that model, deploy that model for your case?
It's to add to that, it's interesting to think of it in terms of like the smallest model, because one thing that we've come to see is that there's this kind of trade-off of, as I was saying earlier, like smaller, faster models versus bigger, more flexible models. And so for us, like we want to have a lot of optionality there to go for the bigger model if accuracy is like the most important thing for you. But a lot of times, like you can trade off generality and get more accuracy and more speed. So we want to help people find like that performance trade-off that works for their application. A lot of people will say, I need a very general kind of frontier model to just answer all the hardest questions that could come my way. And Claude or GPT-4 are like great products for that right now. But still, I think many more people will say we don't need the most advanced frontier models.
Mhm.
What we actually need is for this piece in our pipeline to just do its job really
Yeah.
well, really fast, cheaper, and etc. So that's where we want to be, is like helping people who are exploring self-hosting, on-prem, on device, like these sort of challenges in deployment that stop people from getting to their part of the trade-off that they want to
Mhm.
keep the costs down, the latency low, keep the accuracy high for their application. Again,
Mhm.
not the AGI vision yet. I don't think we're there yet, but there's a lot that can be done with more specialized models, and that's just like a reflection of where we are practically, but also like lots of systems will benefit from distribution, and we kind of avoid that usually. We want the one model to rule them all because it's just way easier to like change that model, deal with that infrastructure. But we think that attacking the ease of use problem can make solutions that might be better fits or give you a better trade-off, might make that more like in reach.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, that makes
That's an
sense.
interesting
So
value proposition. Sorry, Jake, go
yeah,
ahead.
no, you're good. It is interesting. So, is each client at this point, or is the idea are you tailoring your product basically for each client that comes to you? Are you kind of like almost AI consultants where like they come in and they're like, this is what we're going for, and
It's
you're like,
kind of like
okay, well, here are the tools. Let's connect them. Let's help you get to this end result.
That's a good
Okay.
way to think of it. Yeah, we thought a lot of like what we were doing, and we worked with groups consulting on like a short-term project, and found like a group that thought they needed an ML specialist. They really needed one for like a couple of months or something like this.
Hmm.
And so we wanted to make the product able to address those kinds of challenges that we were dealing with. So if we could take like a high level description of your problem, some of the constraints, the kind of thing that you might send to a consultant, then we hope to be able to parse that out and match it to the best recipes or solutions that we have in the back end for carrying out some of those workflows. In the end, you get a model artifact that hopefully puts you a lot closer to that AI application that you're trying to build. There's all this infrastructure around the model, the ML ops problem, right? Where you have your model, great, but like you need to serve it, you need to log the output of it, you need to version control the model. So all of these layers of software that are wrapped around your model deployment are things that we want to make really easy, kind of built into containerized deployments that can be run with a simple CLI.
So I read through a few of your blogs, and I noticed in kind of a recurring theme in a lot of them was the mention of the need for custom data sets. So I was curious, with this tool, how are you generating the data sets? Are they mostly synthetic, or is it a combination of synthetic and organic data you pull from some data dump online?
It's kind of all of the above. And so if a person came in and they had no data, they just said, I need a classifier for this thing versus that thing versus 5 other things, then we want to use like these massive internet scale image data sets to say, pull 1,000 images of this type and that type and construct the data set. But you could imagine someone comes in and says, actually, I need to detect a blue flamingo, and you're not going to find that in the wild either. So like, what could we do? We could generate that. And then, conceptually, some entirely novel kind of out of distribution thing is still able to be like identified, measured with a machine learning model. Now, if someone comes with some data, that's even better. Like we have a kind of a multimodal chat UI. So someone could upload like 5 images and say, I need to differentiate these things. And we can infer what they are. We can use that image with the image retrieval to go pull like 100 examples like it, go use generators and all these other techniques to kind of fill out the data set. And in the end, when you're fine tuning like a high quality image classifier detector or something like this, you might just need a few hundred images, low thousands. You don't need like a billion images to train one of those. So the fine tuning process goes pretty quickly after the image retrieval augmentation.
I think to circle back to the point that you made, Jacob, about the kind of like ML consultant, I think like that's kind of how the app currently works and how we envision like a system of agents being able to work together to then put the pieces together. So to kind of quickly walk you through the flow, when you go into the Remyx site and you log in, you have an agent on the right-hand side, which you can chat with. And essentially from a vague conversation, it'll pick out all of the components or the components necessary to build a recipe to then go ahead and make the output that you need. Kind of like the heart of the agent or the idea is this concept that we've been also kind of trying to socialize, which is called LLM tools. So essentially using an LLM that can serve as an agent that can then interface that vague English language into a set of components that they can be orchestrated into a system that then can be automated in a variety of ways.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Okay. That's great. So I'm curious. Oh, go ahead, Spencer. You're good.
Oh, I was just going to ask if maybe this was a good time to throw in a little bit of a demo if you guys have something that you'd like to share.
Yeah, sure. Actually, I was just thinking it might be good to see it in action instead of
Yeah, I think so.
So let me go ahead and pull up a quick video so it's easy for us to see the entirety of it.
Just while you're logging that in, like to add to that point about LLMs with tools, it's a pattern that you've seen a lot of people achieve like pretty impressive application experiences with, right? Like LLMs have their strengths, but they also have some drawbacks, and hallucination is the one that everyone points to. But if you could, instead of expecting the model to generate everything from scratch, instead use its relative strength at like pattern matching to take your request and map that to a recipe, then you don't need to generate that recipe in all its detail on the fly.
You see on the right-hand side, we're chatting with the agent, and we're telling it, in this case, this example is trying to identify whether my dog is present in her tent, so I could turn on like a heater in there. And in the conversation, it's able to say, okay, we need to identify 2 cases where it's like the dog is in the tent or the dog is outside of the tent. And it made a classifier for me that can run on like a really small device, like microcontroller. And that was all through the conversation. I waited essentially a few minutes. I can test that the model works indeed. My dog is isn't inside her tent there. And so from here, I can go ahead and download the asset so that I can deploy it anywhere. In this case, I was deploying it on an Arduino Portentio board. And so you can see it here running in real time. That classifier can detect my dog Sweet Pea in there, that she is indeed in her tent, and she can now get her heater going. But in the future, we're trying to expand that essentially to also allow, instead of downloading the model asset directly, you can go ahead and just click a button and it'll deploy it, for example, for you. So you can just call an endpoint like you might do for GPT or any of those other services like that.
Interesting. I'm curious, is there any option, just like watching that process where someone comes in and they have an idea of a process they want to automate, and they want to know if their dog's in the tent, for example. Is there any option in the future for like a marketplace, a Remix marketplace or something like that, where you almost have developers coming in and saying like, let's just like build these tools out and people can come in and just like grab it and be like, oh yeah, dog in a tent tool, grab it, and they just run it,
direction, and we thought a lot about that too. Like so we've kind of filled the place of the market ourselves at the moment with like a few high level kind of tasks, engines, patterns to work with, but you could definitely imagine a marketplace for experts in all kinds of domains to come and say, this reference architecture is going to be really valuable, and allow them to benefit from designing that and hosting it on the platform. So we're definitely interested in that idea as a way to scale the kind of applications that we can help build with the community.
I would say that I see it as where as we expand from the abstraction layer of knowing which model or what kind of task it is to even just more general like an application, that we're going to be moving into an area where it's more about like which application you want to make rather than all the components and then having to sum those together. And then we also think that there's an opportunity to bring in more talent for, there's always going to be a customer or someone who really needs a particular solution. They have like a specific set of problems they need to get past. And
interesting. And how would a customer who comes and uses Remix, what's like the pricing strategy there? Is it like a pay for this tool and now it's yours? Is it like a usage? Is it a monthly subscription? What does that look like?
Done a lot of discovery in that direction, and kind of come to the realization, a friend of ours, this man named Adam Frankel, he has a lot of experience with kind of like B2D, like to developers. And the way he frames it is really poignant. He says the magic should be free. And so for us, like, what does that mean? It's like training a model is in this way is kind of magical still. And we also believe that the cost of training these models is going lower, lower, lower. We don't think that a business that exists just to fine tune the models is going to be that competitive in the long run. And really, there's like this whole ML ops challenge. Like there's this classical paper, Hidden Technical Debt in Machine Learning Systems, a great jumping off point for anyone who's kind of curious, like what are all these ML ops challenges we're talking about. But like when you're deploying one of these models, there is like a daily use or a maintenance cost, and it's significant. People will hire a dozen engineers just to maintain an ML pipeline for recommenders or something like this. But our business model is to kind of serve that maintenance and ML ops part of the problem. So you should be able to come in and quickly unblock on getting the right model artifact that you would never find in a model zoo. And when you're ready to deploy it, we'll have the infrastructure to help you do that, log data, version the model, like kind of set up your data flywheel.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where we see the value of the product. And so putting it out in this way, as you see it there, everything's for free. And we would try to build a business plan around monetizing that continuous use. So there'll be like plenty of developers who can experiment with it and get familiar with it without paying that cost. And you can ask like whoever the AI strategist is at your company if this could be a good fit for your experimentation for determining like which base model do you want to use. How can we quickly get a POC going to determine if this is going to be useful in our pipeline. That part, when you're ready to deploy, when you're ready to take on that like maintenance cost, that would be where we could work out like a subscription model or a licensing model. So when we think about subscription, like we said earlier, like we want to be super flexible and give lots of options. Like deploy to an endpoint, it's probably going to be more consumption based. But if you want to self-host and we're not paying for the compute, then maybe there's like a cheaper licensing option where you can say, hey, you know what? I own this model. I own the weights. They did the work for me once, and they have this API that might be helping to log data or helping me to like
manage the infrastructure. So yeah, basically like the idea where we're at right now is we want to make sure that developers have free and open access so that we have, even closer to the ground on what are the kinds of tasks or ideas or projects people are building on that we need to support. And then all the boring but very necessary parts of operationalizing AI will be something that, a small team can then go ahead and license in this different way. So like consumption, like Terry just described, an endpoint, if you have like a cloud hosted option or like a licensing fee for an agent that you can deploy and manage wherever you'd like.
So I guess to put to summarize all of that, it's like tiered subscription or something, right? But yeah, like we want to have a lot of options.
Awesome. I had a question. In the process of reading about you guys, I stumbled across a company called Paramina on LinkedIn talking about being one of your partners. I'd be really interested to hear more about like that case study and what kind of led them to you or led you to them.
Yeah, I think they're great friends of ours. They're a startup in Indonesia right now trying to build a aquaculture platform. So aquaculture out there is really big and it's still very manual, and they want to make it easier for more folks to have analytics over their yields and have like better results and be able to make more money with that. And one of the sub problems that he's trying to solve for those folks is that in particular shrimp farmers, as the name describes, shrimp, really small objects, they need to count those for every vat in their farm. And so, as you can imagine, trying to count like tiny baby shrimp, like 1,000 of them at least in every vat, will take you all day, which it does. You have to pay somebody to like count all of those all day.
Wow.
If they wanted to use the technology, there is a competitor that they have out there that it has like a really expensive giant camera that most people can't afford. So it's like a no-go. Ade, who is the founder of Terramina, he came to us and he was actually saying that he was trying RoboFlow, and it wasn't quite working out for him. He was spending like all day essentially trying to label all of these shrimp, as you can imagine, and he wasn't really able to get to the step where he was training something. So we took that image that he gave us as an example. We exploded that out into a synthetic data set that was representative of like what the scene looked like. And then we trained a YOLO-based detector to be able to count all of the shrimp in the scene. So we were able to do that for him without him necessarily having to continue, trying to label all the shrimp. He just submitted an image, and then we trained that model, and now he has an endpoint he's using.
And just
That's awesome.
that, I mean, an image with 1,000 tiny objects, that's a difficult thing to pull off, counting it accurately. And if you only have 10 images, which is where we started, it's like you can forget about using those 10 labeled images to get a good model. Like, you do need some augmentation strategies, like we've described with synthetic data. So we were able to do this without sitting around and annotating all of those ourselves, and without we basically saved them the annotation costs, and we made a model that was going to work for him. Because if he'd done all of that work with 10 images, he very likely wouldn't have gotten a model he could use.
Yeah, if he had picked the wrong architecture, then maybe it would have been too slow or too expensive or not accurate enough for that kind of like task. So I think we were able to essentially abstract a bunch of the decision points that he needed to make to actually make something useful.
Kind of a follow-on question from that. Have you guys ever put any thought towards making the data set curation aspect kind of a paid service itself? Because from what you're describing to me, it sounds pretty valuable, and I'd be curious if you found that maybe that isn't actually as valuable part of the process as it sounds to me, or if there's some other calculus going on.
We've gotten that feedback before, that like this could be a data synthesis solution, and stop right there. And I guess I think like we would like to be able to expose all the different solutions that we have, so that someone can kind of a la carte it too. We don't want to force you through a workflow that does a bunch of things you don't need. But what we do also want to have that potential integration. So it could be something that we explore more too, like in the engines, there could be a data synthesis engine, or we could help you make a data generator. Like we have design partners we talk to who are doing things with Stable Diffusion, some of these applications that are like people-centric, and they have some challenges where they're making data generators. There could be interest in that too, like just kind of quickly helping people apply Dream Booth or something like this. From a few images, now you can do many. So I do think data synthesis is a valuable part of it, and you could really lean in on just that part of it too.
Yeah, I would say that for now, again, part of that strategy of making the magic free, we're
that
making components available so that we can explore a bit more. I think if there is like a company or a variant where we needed something much more high powered, it required beefier compute to be able to generate a ton more data, then that could be like a tiered service. But I do think it is a valuable area, and whether we monetize that or not, I think it'll still be a component of just that integration story of like making that more accessible, because it's such an integral and important part of it that if you don't have that piece figured out, then the rest is kind of like you're kind of stuck at the beginning.
Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
We're making tools to even help people, like open source tools. We made a project called VQA Synth recently, which would help someone take a directory of images and then be able to essentially run it through a series of steps that can then generate a VQA data set for training like a multimodal model. So awesome. The idea here is like, how do we expand those tools, whether we use them internally or we share them also as well open source? Like, how do we make that possible?
Yeah, I think coming back, I think I've got it. I think you guys are AI cooks.
Yes.
You call them recipes. And I think that's exactly what it is. People come to you and they're like, this is the dish I want. They're like, I want the world's best, cinnamon roll. And you're like, okay, well, for that, you're going to need butter, sugar. You're going to need all these different things, and you cook it up and they just get the cinnamon roll. But like, you're the one that like puts it all together. I think I've got it.
A little salt bay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
I mean, not everything can be approached from the recipes that we've laid out so far. So to that point you brought up earlier, like there could be a lot of value in establishing a marketplace to take on more recipes.
More cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. Have a full menu.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Have like
that's great.
whole Cheesecake Factory type menu, just pages on pages.
Yeah, exactly. Everything from shrimp to everything else.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Just full circle.
Well, I guess first, as we start to kind of wrap up, I'm curious what advice you two would give to startups currently maybe not in the AI space, but
To be affected.
are trying to adapt. What advice would you give?
I would definitely say like learn at least the basics of coding. You know, we have friends, and not all of them are technical founders, but most products are going to have like a technical surface, and it's never been easier to get into coding. You'll hear lots of people say like, "Oh, forget about coding. There's an agent that's going to do all of that for you." But of course, like it can attack parts of the problem, and that's just going to be a very valuable tool for helping you like compose and extend that. I think so many people would do like the next project, but then there's like this stumbling block and that one and the other, and it's like the inertia to just not. And so the more you can equip yourself with these tools, I think the
Yeah.
more value you're going to deliver for your startup and for your
Mhm.
users. So yeah, definitely don't listen to the advice about ignoring code. Just get really good at doing more of it. If anything, in the last year, I think we've both learned a ton. Like when we started, we must have thought like, we know people who are really awesome at infra, and we need someone like that to be on the team to build the kind of thing we're doing.
Hmm.
But you can chat a lot of this out, and the knowledge is out there, and it's never been easier to discover.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would say lean into it instead of working against it. I think there's much more to gain. And it's not all like apocalyptic. I think that we're just all going to be more enhanced rather than necessarily.
Mhm.
So I think it's a tool, just another tool in our toolkit, and it's just going to make us better, faster, and like just more awesome overall. So good to lean into it. On that too, if you're learning it new, or if you're trying something new, make sure to document it and put it out on the internet. Even if it's not fully done, build in public is great. I think for us, we found a lot of benefit in just sharing our journey along the years. And it connects you to people that are also interested in that thing that could work with you on that project, or it could connect you to new opportunities, or even starting your own startup if you wanted. Generally speaking, I think just public sharing is overall beneficial to everyone.
That's
Yeah,
great.
I would say we've been open sourcing projects of ours for a long time, but even in more recent, like in the last year, let's say, learned a lot about how even being more transparent, even putting more out earlier, how valuable that can be. You'll find people who can kind of help steer it in an even better direction. You don't have to worry so much about the competition. It is getting cheaper to kind of knock something out, but
Mhm.
that's also to your own advantage to like move faster on it. So don't hold back from putting out your ideas. Don't think it's not there enough yet. Like get it out early, and
Yeah.
listen to the audience. Talk about the problem more too, rather than the solution.
Yeah,
That's something we've really learned a lot recently. It's like people don't want to be sold to or marketed to. And I know when we first were talking about Remix, it's like, check out Remix, look at Remix now. But what resonates with people, like they don't want to be sold to, especially developers. That's something we also learned from a mentor. So
Mhm.
talk about the problem, and people will resonate with that, and they'll understand that
Yeah.
you're an expert in that space, and they'll want to help you find that PMF.
or you'll learn actually what the real problem is
Sure.
if you don't have the right
Yeah.
idea.
Yeah.
That's really good advice. Alrighty.
Well, real quick, Terry and Salma, if people want to follow Remix, if they want to follow you, what are the best platforms, handles that people should look at?
Yeah, you can find us on Twitter with the @remyx.ai handle or the @smellslikeml handle. We post a lot of stuff from the Smells Like one in particular. You can also find us on LinkedIn, so you can find Terry and myself there, and we're more than happy to connect. I think now more than ever, we'd love to get to more conversations with more folks.
Yeah.
I'll make sure to include those links in the video description when we post this, and I'll include a link to your Smells Like ML blog as well. Make sure that drives some audience there.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you both so much. Here, I'm gonna end. Unless, is there anything else, Spencer, Terry, Salma, that you wanted to add before I end the recording?
I just want to say thanks again for hosting us. It's been a lovely conversation, and it's really awesome to be connected with the community. So I hope we can come back and have even more awesome discussions in the future.
Yes, definitely.